soon as I looked at this image, everything that I'm about to tell you came flooding into my head. I have a memory that the whole room was just absolutely drowned in white light. The next memory I have is that I'm stood up outside of my bed, facing the direction of the window. It was real, and everything inside of me says that I had this experience.
Hi guys, welcome back to the 401 Files. My name is Ben and I create content here on the 401 Files with everything that you could possibly consider to be thought-provoking. Now this includes the Bigfoot phenomena, extraterrestrials and UFOs, and even the paranormal. But I would say that my main centre of attention is based around the UFO and extraterrestrial phenomenon. This is where I spent a lot of my time studying, researching, and even had my own experiences in this field. Now coming up on this video, I recently had the pleasure of sitting down with a guy called G, who is the co-host over at another YouTube channel called the Monty Zone. So you guys please head over to the Monty Zone and show your support there as well. I will leave a link below. But G sits down with me for the next hour and however long this video is to discuss an experience that he had when he was 14 years old. Now I don't want to say too much, I don't want to give too much away, but this is kind of based around the alien abduction phenomena, a part of the extraterrestrial and UFO niche that I've been obsessed with for many, many years. So this was such a pleasure for me to sit here with G and go through some of the finer details about his experience. But I must give you a pre-warning, guys. In parts of this interview, it is quite tricky still for G to get through some of the information and some of the details. So please do be respectful at all times, be patient and enjoy. Grab yourself a coffee, guys, sit back, relax and enjoy this one, guys. I'll see you at the end. So, G, this isn't the first time that we've actually spoke. We did speak on a live session recently on the Monty Zone, which is another YouTube channel that you kind of co-host. Is it safe to say the word co-host?
Yeah, it's safe to say the word co-host. Yeah, it's Monty's channel, but I help him. We've been lifelong friends, and he asked me if I wanted this show with him. As I say, we've been friends for like almost 40 years, and we just sit around talking about strange stuff a lot of the time over drunken nights, and just talking about all the mysteries of the world. So we thought we would do a show that's very much like somebody just tuning into one of our conversations and catch ups. So yeah, he asked me to do that on his channel, and we just last week we did episode 10. So we're 10 episodes in now. We do one a fortnight, and just cover very similar stuff to like what you cover on your channel, like thought-provoking stuff. We go into mysterious archaeology and UFOs and cryptozoology, and just anything sort of paranormal as well.
Awesome.
Just, probing into it a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. It's a vast area to get into. There's so many different rabbit holes that you can go down and so many different things you can talk about, like you just said there with the paranormal, the UFOs, etc. There's so many different outlets and cast-offs to this thought-provoking subject. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, it's opening doors for me, like to stuff that I didn't even realize, and information that really makes you appreciate just, like you joined us for the episode where we did on Bigfoot, and just how many different theories and schools of thought there are around Bigfoot make the subject super interesting, even if it's just to delve in and just research it. It's super interesting.
So recently I made a video where I spoke about my interest of ufology, how I got interested in extraterrestrials, etc. And on that video, I spoke about an experience that I had as a child. And shortly after you contacted me with some similarities and an experience of your own, do you want to just talk about how you got into extraterrestrials, the UFO phenomenon, and maybe just take it from there?
Yeah, so the experience that I had, I was 14 years old at the time. Before that, I wasn't even into sort of science fiction. The extent of my science fiction went like most 14-year-old boys to like Star Wars and things like that. But I was into things like A-Team and Airwolf, basically anything that begin with an A. Just joking. MacGyver, programs like that. I wasn't really into science fiction in a big way. There was a lot of, I'd seen E.T. like the rest of the world, but didn't really have an interest in that sort of area. And then years after my experience, it sort of like changed me as a person, because, this was sort of 33 years ago, and I'm still looking for answers now, answers to my experience and just answers to the whole subject, really. So it's just about continuing to look for information and evidence. And there was a couple of things that you said in your experience that I definitely related to, which I'll discuss in a little bit. But it was that situation of just a load of memories coming flooding back all at the same time. And to this day, I'm sort of still convinced that I wasn't ever supposed to have those memories. I wasn't supposed to remember them. And again, sorry to say again, but like later on, some explanation of that will come out. But so then I after my experience when I was sort of 14, I didn't really talk about my experience to anybody for at least 3 years. I happened to move to the States, and I met somebody in the States who was quite open. I lived in Arizona, and this person was quite open to talking about experiences and things that they had seen in the desert in Arizona. And sort of that opened the doorway to the conversation. So that person was the first person that I kind of opened myself to in terms of my experience, but it didn't really particularly go very well because it was really difficult to talk about. And actually over the years, what I've had to do is really think about how I talk about this experience and how I explain it, because if I don't do it right, I become quite frustrated and quite emotional because of it, because it's just difficult to talk about. But so, as I said, it was about sort of 3 years after the first time that I spoke about it to somebody else in confidence. And after that conversation, I've only discussed this experience with maybe 3 other people in the 33 years since it's happened. And most of those times probably a little bit inebriated as well, and getting Dutch courage to sort of talk about it. So this is the first time that I've really spoken about it quite openly, probably sober as well. Yeah. But for me, the memories came back sort of what I can only imagine is 24, 48 hours after the experience. It wasn't years later. And when the memories came back, again, when I was watching your video and you were talking about it, it just brought memories back to me of that day when those memories came flooding back, and it was so aggressive that it made me vomit. Because it was just a very, very strange experience. But as I said, I'm not. I haven't not spoken to a lot of people about it because of shame or people not believing or embarrassment, because I'm gonna share this experience today, and there's gonna be probably 9 out of 10 people who will not think that will think that there's probably something. I'm quite a logical person like yourself. We've had discussions about this, open-minded, always looking for wanting to believe, but then also in a slight way being skeptical because you want to make sure that you're coming at it from a very logical approach.
Yeah, I think the term is open-minded skeptic. We're open-minded, but we're skeptical.
Yeah, exactly. So even within my own experience, I can absolutely give probably somewhere in the region of 20 different explanations that may explain the experience and what other people would probably attribute to that experience. But the only difference in that is, for me, is that every bone in my body tells me that that this experience happened, because it changed me so massively as a person. What I was going to go on to say just a minute ago is that after the experience, I then, the sort of, you know, next sort of decade, I would say, I really delved into trying to learn everything I could about UFOs, the history of UFOs, different people's experience with the alien encounters. I became a huge fan of like X-Files, and you know, just, and it wasn't just watching TV, it was exploring books, documentaries, anything that, because, you know, for a good 10 years I was just seeking answers.
Yeah.
And I have to say I didn't find them, but then, you know, over the extended 33 years since this has happened, I've then returned to it again and again and again. And, you know, obviously recently doing the Monty Zone, it's brought up a lot of, you know, and researching that sort of subject matter, it's brought up a lot of those feelings again. Like, if I could rewind time to when I was 17 and I sat down and had that conversation with the first person I talked to about, I think that pretty much what I'm about to tell you today would be mirror for mirror, word for word. You know, I've tried not to, you know, all the research and the reading that I've done and watching of things and speaking to people, I've tried not to let that influence what my experience is all about, and stay true to what that was. You know, as I go through and explain it, you'll realize that there's an element of physical evidence to it as well, which I can't seem to locate and I can't seem to find. And that's another thing that I'm hoping to get from this process, is that maybe somebody will be watching and listening and go, oh, I remember that, and be able to help me find this one piece of missing evidence that I've been looking for, you know, a good sort of 25 years. You're talking about false memory. Well, I actually believe quite strongly that within my experience, there is false memory, and it's intentional false memory. I don't think I was meant to remember any of it, but I think, you know, there's an element of, there was a safety net that if I did remember it, that there was all this, a couple of things that were false memory in there. And so, being the sort of skeptical, open-minded person I am, I can certainly go, well, you know, this could have just been a dream. However, there's two things that sort of always move me away from that. One, there is physical evidence involved, and if I was able to locate that, that would really, for me, solidify that this wasn't a dream, this wasn't just a random you know, false memory. And also the fact that, you know, when you experience something or anything, you know in your bones that it's real. You know, I don't want to liken, I don't want to make too many comparisons to films, but a great film is like Contact with Jodie Foster in it. And at the end of the film, she's talking to the government panel and she's saying, you know, they ask her, could you concede that this is all just a hoax, and you know, it was perpetrated by so and so? And she says, yeah, as a scientist, I have to, you know, I have to submit that. And then he says, well, why don't you just drop this whole silly nonsense? And she says, because I can't, because everything inside me says that, you know, it was real, and everything inside of me says that I had this experience, and that's the only difference. And that's the thing that I cannot communicate to somebody else. I cannot, unfortunately, that's where the frustrating thing comes in, because I can't pass that to somebody else. Somebody else can't experience that, and I can't show it to them. It's just in my heart of hearts, you know, I know that something happened. As I said, it happened in my family home when I was 14. We know my parents no longer live there. My parents have retired and moved to Cornwall. However, I still live in Plymouth, but I live across the other side of the city to this house where we used to live. But now and then I have to, you know, for whatever reason, drive by there. And, you know, whenever I drive by there, instead of having memories of all the good times and, you know, all the fond memories of growing up there as a family and all the good things that happened, all I think about is this experience.
Yeah.
And that's a bloody shame, as far as I'm concerned, because it's unresolved for me. It's something that for the last 33 years is really niggled at me. And you know, you can't you know.
It's okay, G. Take a minute. Take a minute, buddy. It's fine.
The one thing that I would just really like is, you know, like a resolution.
Yeah, closure.
You know, closure. So in part, I'm kind of hoping that, you know, this might help.
Yeah.
And and see what other people have got to say. And
yeah, and I'm hoping that just talking to me as well, somebody else that's been through similar things, helps you in some way as well. Just to know that everybody out there isn't going to poke fun, laugh, or call you crazy. So, So G, do you want to kind of walk?
Yeah, I've had.
Sorry, go on, G.
You know, it took me quite a while and quite a few times of telling people to be able to even put it in a way that I can talk about it. So as a 14-year-old kid, I probably wouldn't have been making any sense to anybody. But I guess I think you were just about to say, if like we want to get into it, I probably think it's best that I start kind of.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you want to walk us into your experience, we've set the scene really well now, and I'm sure that everybody's
definitely
dying to hear it.
So as I said, my experience isn't particularly linear, and I'm going to start at a very strange place, and it just helps me to tell this story. So I was 14, and it was 1989, so some of you could probably work out my age from that. And I was in school. It was lunchtime, and I was heading over to the music department to see one of my friends. It was a female friend called Nikki, but she was a few years older. I was 14 at the time. She was a few years older. She was 16, and she was in that period of time where, you know, she'd finished school. She was just going back into school for exams, etc. So she wasn't in uniform, and she was hanging out in the music teacher's office because, you know, when you're like one of the older kids, and she technically finished school, and she was always really friendly with the music teacher, as I was as well, because we were both heavily into music. She was allowed to hang out in his office. So I went to see her, and she sort of beckoned me to come into the office, and I was like, oh no, I better not. And she's like, no, he'll be fine about it, you know, the music teacher. So I went in, and I'm chatting to her, and as I'm chatting to her, I noticed this newspaper on the desk that's half folded. And, you know, I can't tell you what newspaper it was. I mean, we have a local newspaper called the Plymouth Evening Herald, but I don't know if it was a national newspaper. This is, you know, some of the details that I'm sort of frustrated at. But it was half folded, and again, I can't remember if it was folded on the front page, or somebody had already was reading it and then had folded it in half. But what brought my attention is I just saw half of an image on the newspaper that just caught my attention. And so I picked up the newspaper and I opened it, and it was this full picture of a crop circle in a field. But it was very, very simple crop circle. In fact, it wasn't, you know, just typically a crop circle. It was a bit like a crop circle / ditch. It was just in this field that slightly had an incline to it, and I had a hedge, a big hedge separating two fields. So what you're looking at in the image is the edge of one field. And as I say, the crop circle wasn't very intricate. It was just, you know, one plain circle about 10 meters in diameter. But as soon as I looked at this image, everything that I'm about to tell you came flooding into my head all in one go, and so strongly that I can even remember my friend Nikki said to me, like, what's wrong with you? You've gone white as a ghost. and then I ran off and I ran to the toilet and I threw up. So I guess it was kind of like me having my first sort of like panic attack or something. I don't know. It was just, and what ended up happening from that is that because a bunch of the kids were telling the teacher who'd come back that I was being sick, I got sent down to the school nurse, and I was just really like in such a strange place that when the nurse said, "Oh, do you want me to call your parents and go home?" And I said, "Yeah." And obviously I was 14, so I had keys to the house by this point, so I didn't need my parents, both who worked full time, to come home. But I got let home from school, and I went home, and I was, all out of sorts for the rest of that day. But as we were talking about earlier on, I woke up the next day, and because you're 14, I just brushed it off and just got on with the next day, no problem. And it wasn't until one day afterwards I was like really, again, then affected heavily by what I remember. So anyway, I think I should now go through like what the memories that came flooding into my head when I saw that image in the newspaper. So the first one starts off with I shared with you, Ben, some photos and some pictures of my bedroom as a kid. Yeah. I basically I had a single bed which was under a sort of cubby hole. It had cupboards above it, and then a wardrobe at the end, so it almost like made a kind of little cubby hole. That's where the single bed was, and that was directly in front of the door that you'd walk into the room, and at the end of the room was the window. So the room was rectangular in shape with the window at the end. Anyway, the first memory I have is that I'm in bed and I've woken up, but I've woken up and I'm upside down with my face directly into the pillow, laying flat down on the bed. And there's this huge weight or pressure on me to the point where I cannot move. I cannot get myself up off the bed. I recall going into that sort of press up position and trying to use my hands to push me up, and I could not move. The only thing that I could move was my head. And the reason why I moved my head is because, one, it was flat into the pillow. I'm sweating like a pig, and I don't know whether I was sweating because, when you put your head into a pillow and you're sort of breathing into a pillow, it instantly makes you very, very hot. But it felt like there was a slab of stone or something on top of me, like something huge weighing me down or pushing me down. And the reason why I wanted to move my head is because I can recall first and foremost that there was this really intense humming, bass humming, which sort of sounded like everything was vibrating really fast. The walls, the ceilings, everything was in so fast, or that's what it felt like, that it was almost in slow motion. But all you get a sense of this intense white light as well. And when I turned my head, and as I said, my head was the only thing that I could turn, I definitely have a memory that the whole room was just absolutely drowned in white light, a really intensive white light. And that's where my first memory really ends. The next memory I have is that I'm stood up outside of my bed, facing the direction of the window, but I can't see the window or the end of the room. Just looks like a white wall. And as I said, at the end of the bed, there was a wardrobe, and the other side of the room, acrossways, was a desk. And all I saw really, really fast was a shadow cross from one side of the room to the other side of the room behind my wardrobe. And I can't tell you anything about what this thing was, or whether it was a thing, or whether it was just something else. But it, when you see cartoons and comics and you've got somebody running fast and they've got all that vapor behind them. Yeah. It was kind of like that. It was just like one big black blur of somebody running, and, instantly you would think, well, if you saw something go behind the cupboard, what did you go and look behind the cupboard? But in my memory, I'm frozen on the spot. I'm not in control of my own movement. I'm not able to move. And then that's where the second memory ends. Is it literally just ended with me thinking to myself in my head, did something just cross my room? Is something in the room with me? The next memory I have is that the room is now dark, and I am slowly, and when I say slowly, I mean really slowly, walking towards the window. And as I'm getting closer and closer to the window, what I'm seeing outside the window is lots of different orb lighting, not together. So what I'm not saying, what I don't want people to think, is that I'm saying that I saw a vessel, lights on a vessel. These lights are flashing all over the sky. Now, I forgot to say at the beginning is that, and again, I shared this with you.
Google Maps. 1 second, G.
Where my family?
Right, stay there. 1 minute. G, you there?
Yeah.
Okay. If you just carry on from there, well, I think we're back now. I got up to the.
Where did you have me up to?
Had you up to walking slowly to the window, seeing the lights outside, and you're not saying it was like a vessel, but
yeah. So basically, what I forgot to say at the beginning was that my family home, and I shared a picture of Google Maps with you, was right next to Plymouth Airport. And when I say right next to Plymouth Airport, when I was a kid, and again, I've shared the pictures with you, it was literally the edge of our garden, a road, a lane, and then this sort of slight grass verge that you could walk up, and you could walk straight onto the airport runway. There was no fences around the airport at this time. So as kids, we used to run up onto the airport and get in trouble. The guys in their fire engines with the ambulances would come out, the airport security, and chase us off the runway. But that's how close I was to the airport.
Yeah.
And my window of my bedroom faced out towards the airport. And so as I'm walking towards the window, what I'm saying is that there was these flashes of orb lights all throughout the skyline, like in different places. And I thought it was, you know, if you'd asked me sort of distance, I thought that they were over the airport, but it was, as I say, all over the skyline, everywhere in my vision. So it's not like I'm saying that I was seeing some vessel where the lights were shining off of that vessel. These lights were just all over the place, and that's the end of that memory. Then the next memory. This is the one that I think is a false memory. All of a sudden, I'm stood outside the front of my family home from the main road that was out the front of our house, looking up backwards at the house next to the lamppost. And again, I went over the other day and took a photo. I stood in that exact spot that I remember in that memory, and I took a photo. So you've got that one, Ben, that you can share with everybody. Yeah. But what was weird about this memory is that it was the middle of the day, really beautiful day. The sky was beautifully blue, not a cloud in sight. And I'm stood there looking up at my house with a lamp next to, there's a street light. And weirdly, my house seems way taller than what it should have been. And then all of a sudden I see this vessel coming towards me, this ship coming towards me, and it stops right in front of me, right above me. And like, this is the silly bit, right? So the vessel that's in this whole memory looked almost identical to the one that's in Flight of the Navigator. I don't know if you remember that 80s film. I had never watched Flight of the Navigator when I was 14 years old, because Flight of the Navigator came out in 1986 and was a bit of a kid's film. And by the age of 14, you're too cool for school, and I wasn't going to watch some kids' film. So I hadn't even watched Flight of the Navigator, but I must have seen some sort of trailers or posters or something like that, because I have a distinct memory thinking to myself within the memory itself, that's the ship from Flight of the Navigator. It was gold. It had the ship from Flight of the Navigator, silver, I think. But this was really egg-shaped, so it was really narrow at the front, like pointed at the front, and then like spherical at the back. And it was was really bright gold, and it had sort of like hieroglyphs all on the outside, and it just hovered there. There was no noise, there was no nothing, and it came out from the skyline from the distance really fast, and then just stopped in front of me all of a sudden, and I just stood there looking at it. Now, for me, this memory is a false memory. This is I think of it as an inserted memory, like a fake memory, because everything else that's with my experience with nighttime. So why all of a sudden was I stood in front of my house in the middle of a really sunny, bright day and seeing a ship or something that looked similar to something from a film? Anyway, so that whole memory within the sequence, and as I said to you earlier, I'm telling you these memories, the order in which they came flooding back to me. And then the next memory, all of a sudden, I'm back into that feeling that I've got something pressing on me, but this time it's pressing me upwards, and I'm on the ceiling somewhere. I have a really strong impression that I was on a ceiling on some sort of vessel, and I'm looking down to what should be the floor, but the floor is kind of transparent, and what I am seeing through the floor is land at night passing really super quickly. So if you imagine that you were about 10 or 15 meters off the floor, I'm seeing fences, and I'm seeing everything so fast and passing through my vision so fast that it made me, I think I lost consciousness, because when you're looking at something really fast, and it's kind of like, and then you start sort of go, oh, I can't, but I remember that I was upside down, but it felt like I was being pushed up. I would be as bold to say that it kind of, although there was an impression of a force on me, that it felt like I was weightless, but I know that there was meant to be a floor, but I'm seeing through the floor somehow, some way. And as I said, I think I lost consciousness, because the next thing I then remember is that I'm in the same position and feeling like I'm still in a vessel, but the vessel started, I'll grab my hat a minute. So imagine this is the vessel, my hat, and I'm up inside in here, and all of a sudden the vessel, or the thing that I'm in, started going up like this, so that then, even though I'm in there and I was looking down, I'm now looking straight across. And what I saw when I was looking straight across was a field, and I saw a vessel landing in a field, and the ship, I want to call it a ship, but I've given some thought to this, and it could have been a drone for all I know. And I don't mean a human drone, but I just mean the fact that it was just solid. It looked like solid iron. It was gray, no special features, no lights, no distinguishing markings. It just looked like a very, probably about this thick, probably about a meter thick, and about 10 meters in width, and it was just spinning really fast, and it had again what looked like an iron square in the middle of it. And you'll have seen on one of the Monty Zone episodes, when we were doing mysterious photos, I brought to the conversation about the Trent photo. Are you familiar with the Trent photo?
Just run it past me briefly. Is that the
it's the one
Scotland?
From the 19 no, it's from America, from a farmer.
Above the
Trent, and
are you talking about the one above the phone lines? Is it the famous
that one?
Shit? Yeah,
the one that's
black and white,
still,
famously famous
Yeah,
sources.
it's one of those ones where it still hasn't been fully debunked yet.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why I brought that up in that show and why I have an affinity for that photograph is because the ship that you see in that photograph is almost identical to what I saw. In the fact that it's got this little thing in the middle of it, and it just looked like pure iron. It didn't look like anything fancy. There wasn't any like bright colored lights on it or anything. But anyway, I saw this thing spinning, and I saw it landing in the field. And the reason why I say drone is because it was not very thick, and I'm just assuming that it wasn't manned. But anyway, so I saw this vessel land, and that's pretty much where my experience ends. And then the next day or the day after, as I said, my memory can't recall. I'll go back to the beginning of the story. I went into the office with my friend to see my friend and saw this newspaper. And the picture in the paper where the crop circle is the field that I saw the vessel landing in.
Wow, that is incredible.
It's the exact same. You know, when I saw it, I had all these memories come flooding back into me, and I remember seeing what it was that landed in that circle to make that crop circle. And as I said, it wasn't really like your stereotypical crop circle. It was a combination of like a crop circle and a kind of like ditch. Yeah. And it was very simple. It wasn't ornate, or it didn't have like wild patterns. And I would God love it. I've tried to research and try to see if I can find this newspaper article that had this picture in it. And I you know, even up to about a week ago, I was still trying to do some searches to see if I could find anything in archives. There's one hope that I've got. I've recently found out that there's a new museum that's opened in Plymouth called The Box, and they apparently hold all the archives for all of the Plymouth Herald papers for the last 100 years. And you could book an appointment to go in there and see somebody, and they can help you try and find like an old article that you're looking for. And I may give that a try to see if it was in the local paper. But, you know, for years I've been searching to see if I can find this picture. Yeah. But that's what set it all off. And that's the only memories I have. And as I said, some of them, they're like snapshots, so there's lots of missing stuff in between, like how did I get from here to there. There's memories that I've now over time come to kind of, maybe someone could say, well, that's incorrect to do that, but I've assumed that they're false memories. Yeah. I don't think I was meant to remember any of this. I don't think if I hadn't seen that picture in the newspaper that I would remember any of it. But I do feel that for whatever reason, that there's false memories in there, whether that's something that my brain's done to just be a coping mechanism, I don't know, or whether they're intentionally embedded in me and somebody's put them in there again. So a lot of people, you know, that are listening to the story could say, well, you know, why don't you just conclude that you had like a dream? Well, now you'll understand that I saw a picture in a newspaper and I was convinced that I had been there. And I convinced that I had memories of seeing what it was that landed in there. And not just seeing that, but everything that led up to that moment as well. Traveling across what seemed like a long distance, but in a very insane, you know, like speeds that were unknown at the time, you know, like my brain couldn't even process it, to the point where I think I fell unconscious because I couldn't deal with seeing how quickly the land underneath me was passing in front of me. And yeah, so that's my experience.
That's an absolutely incredible experience, G. And I'm going to be thinking about this for weeks and months after. Some of the points that you made that really interest me is obviously the one where you're face down, looking at the land zooming past below you. That's really interesting. And secondly, this slab, this weight being placed on your back, keeping you face down or holding you up against the ceiling. These are things that people do talk about probably more than you you're aware of over and over again in abduction cases. And that's exactly, to me, what this sounds like. There's no denying that. Do you think that this happened all in one night, or do you think this was multiple nights compressed into one memory to make it feel like it was one night?
So one of the things that I just want to go on record saying now is that I can't say whether my experience was scary or like anything one meant me any harm, or and I can't also say whether it was a peaceful experience. What I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt is when as I said, when I was 16, I moved to America as a part of a student exchange program. So I spent a year living with a host family, and I went to high school in Phoenix, Arizona, and graduated high school. And and this was in sort of 1991, before the internet, before transatlantic travel was super popular, before we had email. So it was quite a big deal to be going to the other side of the planet and knowing that I wouldn't be able to come home for over a year. I wouldn't be able to see any of my friends or family, only be able to write to them and talk to them on the phone occasionally. But again, there was no mobile phones. It was just long distance calls, and they cost a huge amount of money. But when I made that move, now this is going to sound really silly, and sometimes when I think it, but I was thankful. I honestly remember thinking to myself, maybe they won't find me if I'm across the other side of the world. Now, I can't say whether something happened on multiple occasions. I can say wholeheartedly to you that I've not had any other experience since this. This is carried with me for 33 years. And in those 33 years, I wouldn't lay claim to the fact that I've had any other similar experience. So I don't know if it's a repetitive thing or not. I have looked into, as I said, I've done my research and I've done my looking into stuff. And you were mentioning about in other cases, people have reported lack of gravity. And this is where I've come to realize through some of the research that I've done that the memory where I'm stood outside my house and it's daylight could be a false memory, because, I've read a lot of cases where people claim that they've got memories that they just don't understand, that they don't seem like they belong within the whole.
Yeah. But the great thing about that memory, that was going to be the third point that I made, is that memory underneath the streetlight, if it is a false memory, would make a lot of sense, because a lot of these people that come back and claim to have had false memories inserted in their brain are usually false memories that are going to make you piece together the story or make a better understanding of the story or the situation. Now, if you're seeing strange lights outside your window, but then the next thing you stood under a street light, who knows? Maybe they've tried to make you believe that, oh, right, okay, what I was seeing was just a street light. It might not make sense to you, but to somebody else who's trying to, do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, definitely.
For example, in the Allagash incident, where the 5 teachers went on a fishing trip to the Allagash lakes. They were abducted on the lake, taken out from the boat, and when they were placed back in the boat, they'd all almost been put in positions where it looked like they were still fishing. So they start to come round, these effects start to wear off them, and everything's a blur. Nothing makes sense, but the way they're sat, the way they're holding the rods and everything else just looks like they were before they were taken. And so maybe these people or these beings that are taking people or doing whatever it is that they're doing know that they have to make it as realistic as possible for when they put you back. Because does that make sense? Like, you standing under the street light as a 14-year-old boy could have easily convinced yourself that actually that is what I was seeing, when really there's more to it.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I was going to say is that I was saying that I don't recall any other experience, since this one, or I don't have any other memories. However, a lot of through my 20s, one of the things that I did find, doing my research, and something that is similar to things that I have encountered, is that throughout my 20s, I did used to struggle a little bit with marks and scratches, etc., appearing on my body with like no explanation. There was one time where I had a huge scratch going from like the middle of my shoulder blades all the way down to the bottom of my back. It's like a huge scratch, not deep, things like that. But again, all I can do is I can only talk about the experience that I remember. And as I said, I was saying at the beginning about even some of the memories themselves that I take for granted, that they, like the one where I'm stood in the street looking back at my house, I'm at this point convinced that that's a fake memory. But I was talking earlier on about some of my memories. I feel that I'm remembering them the wrong way around.
Yeah.
But what I've chosen to do is tell you them as I remembered them.
Yeah.
But in recent times, I've been thinking that the memory where I'm stood in my bedroom once I'm out of my bed and I'm walking towards the window, or I don't want to say I was floating toward, but it just felt very strange, like as if I wasn't walking normally. I have given some thought to the fact that maybe I was actually walking away from the window, and that I wasn't, and that this memory was at the end of my experience, not at the beginning. But then I have nothing to back that up. It's again just a feeling. But the whole thing, I've carried this with me for 3 years, and I've tried not to make sure that, as I said to you, I've not been influenced by a lot of the stimulus that I've absorbed over the years and the interest that I now have in the subject. I've tried to remain pure, and I can, again, going, now that I've shared my experience, you can understand why it would be completely acceptable for somebody to say, well, why don't you think you've just had a dream, or you're just remembering something incorrectly, or I can get it because I've got no evidence to provide anybody other than what I remember. So if somebody doesn't believe that my experience was a true experience, it doesn't faze me, it doesn't bother me. In fact,
yeah, well, even if it's a dream, it's a fascinating dream, because I'm sure you've experienced many dreams in your life, and none of them have ever impacted you in this way. And you're also having a dream that predicts something that happened in the future, because the newspaper of the crop circle obviously happened after you'd had your experience of this thing hovering over that field. So
that's why I can't pinpoint the date, because back in the day, making myself sound so old, but the way I've thought about it logically is, if somebody had had that crop circle in their field, journalists from the newspaper come out taking a photo of it on one day, but it probably didn't make the paper that day because things weren't that fast, so it probably came out in the paper the next day. So that's where it gives a window of time of like 24 to 48 hours. I don't know what the time scale was to when that picture then appeared in the newspaper.
Yeah.
But up until that point, a distance of time had passed where obviously I didn't have any recollection of this experience. And then all of a sudden, see that picture, all these memories come flooding back, run to the toilet, throw up, because I was having so much issue dealing with what was going on in my head and just how it weirded me out. And then, but it was because of that reaction that I then didn't even think to go and grab the, if I could rewind time now, like the one thing I would have done was, gone and got that newspaper, and, but you can't live your life in regret. And again, I'm not trying to get anything out of my experience either. I thought it would be nice to share with you, because I've heard some of the great content that you've been sharing on your channel, and some of the stuff that you've been talking about, and I just felt compelled that I wanted to share as well, and hopefully there might be somebody out there that's listening to this that something similar is happening to them and they've never really talked about it. And again, I've not really talked about it a lot with people, not through embarrassment or worry that they won't believe me. It's about the fact that it's confusing to talk about. It's difficult. Like, it took me, the first time I tried to talk to this, as I said, it was in America, with a friend over there, and I just messed it up. I didn't know how to formulate those memories and how to talk about them. I was talking about them all out of sequence, and like at the end I said to him, oh, you know, I then went into school, and it didn't make any sense telling it that way, and it was all very, very, very frustrating. So it's just, you know, it's my experience, and I don't think, you know, there's a lot of people, 90% of people I probably won't convince that it's real, but I don't care. I've literally got to the point in my life that I don't care. It's mine, and I've just got to find my way to work around it.
Yeah, there's so many.
But there are parts where I'm interested in, like you were saying in your video about maybe considering, it's not something that I thought of before, but things like hypnotic regression, see if there are any gaps that I could fill. You know, but then I'm just worried about being overly influenced by somebody else and by that process in itself.
Yeah, I've got the same.
And what value would it offer me? I don't know. Only to deepen the frustration. I don't know.
Yeah, but, it's like me when I've been thinking about going into hypnotic regression to try and recall some of these memories. I'm thinking that sounds like a great idea, but only if the memories I get back are of the same intensity as the one that came back originally. Because otherwise I'm going to be thinking this person's put things in my brain. Am I making up my own false memories now? Did that really happen? So if I was to recall anything during hypnotic regression, I'd want it to hit me with the same intensity as it did when I first remembered the whole scenario.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I said, if there's anybody watching who knows anybody who does, you know, again, it's something that I'm open to, but I've always avoided it because I've just thought, well, maybe would I be skeptical of it myself? But then maybe I could do it and nothing comes of it, and that would almost be good to know that there's nothing else there to probe. So I guess it's just having that sense of adventure, really, to want to try, you know, and explore all these different things that you can look into. But
so Jake, as well, can I just pick your brain? I know that you can't remember outside what you've already spoke about, but I just want to ask these questions anyway. Did you hear any kind of communication, like when you saw the shadow, or at any point when you was up against this roof? Did you hear any kind of communication, any noises at all?
So the only noise that I recall was the noise at the beginning of the experience when I was laid face down in bed, and just this insane kind of like everything was pulsating, but like a deep bass, almost off the visible, you know, for us to be able to hear. But I could, you know, like sometimes when your ears are blocked and you get that kind
like
of
off the audio spectrum, kind of like
yeah. And I recall noise then. I don't recall any other sounds or interaction. As I said to you when I first contacted you about doing this interview, that it was Close Encounter of the Second Kind, because I saw craft, but I've never been confident enough to say that I saw an entity, because the only thing I saw was this really fast shadow, and it's like almost thinking that something moved out of the corner of my eye, but I was looking straight forward and it was so fast. I do recall thinking to myself, oh my God, I don't want to see what's behind that wardrobe. Like,
that was the next thing I was going to ask you is, I remembered emotion. Like, I remembered how I felt when I saw this creature, and it wasn't scared. It was, oh, right, okay, this is a joke. So my emotion at that point was quite relaxed, and I believed that people were trying to pull a joke on me. So I was going to ask you that next. I was going to say, do you remember how you felt during these times?
No, the only recollection of emotional reaction that I have is from the the part of the experience where I saw the newspaper article, and just the intenseness of that. Other, just to go back to what I was saying earlier, I wouldn't want to ever comment on whether I felt that this experience was one that needed to be feared or whether it was benign in nature. I honestly couldn't comment on that because I have no recollection of it. I mean, the only thing that I could say is that in all the times, like, for example, when I felt like I was on the ceiling and pressed up against somewhere or floating and looking down, I didn't feel like I was ever going to fall or that I was unsafe, but what the intention behind it was, or I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, it's fine. It's interesting that you remember it being nighttime as well. Like, you're taken from your bedroom at night. It was obviously bedtime. You was in bed. And then when you're up on this roof looking down at the fields and the fences passing by, it's nighttime still. So I just find those little small details very interesting.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because there's a part of that that's really, really relevant, because for quite a few years after, because I didn't know very much about aliens or UFOs, or, as I said, my scope of knowledge at this point was probably like ET. And yeah, I mean, Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out way before this, but it wasn't a film that I'd watched. And, I didn't actually watch Close Encounters of the Third Kind until my late 20s. But the one thing that really, for years afterwards, like, made me just think that is the whole concept of how did I come out of my bedroom? Like, it's a window, it's a wall. And also that window was a window that kind of, it opened up like that, like one big window, but then it didn't go any further than a 45-degree angle. So, like, how would have anything, like, the thing that I can remember I used to ask myself a lot in terms of judging my own reality and whether this was real was like, well, how did they get me out of the window? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, surely somebody would have seen me. But you have to learn, or at least I've learned over time, that there's possible other explanations for that and things,
and I think that
an advanced science can.
That's it. I was just going to say the same thing. I was going to say that at some point we have to accept that there's maybe something outside of science. Now, people will say, well, science is everything. You can't have something outside of science. So I guess kind of what I'm trying to say is outside the understanding of science as we know it right now. So maybe in 100,000 years from now, science might figure out a way or understand a way that is possible, because we hear a lot of abduction stories where people dematerialize. And I know that sounds like sci-fi, futuristic stuff, but a lot of these abduction cases, and this is repeated time and time again, claim that these beings, or this shaft of light, came through the window, their body dematerialized, and they almost went through the wall. And then when they were on this craft, they materialized again in physical form. Now we can't understand that in terms of science, but that's obviously happening to people all around the world. This doesn't just come out in one story here. It comes out all over the world from hundreds of different people. So yeah, very strange.
That's the other reason why I shared that Google Maps with you, because again, in the years after, when doing research, I sort of found out that there's quite a commonality between UFO hotspots being located near airports or government facilities, and the fact that I lived literally sort of 100 meters away from the edge of a runway. I kind of think that's in its sense element. But just to create some background, that airport wasn't a commercial airport. It just used to have freight flights running in there, and the odd occasional private plane, and they used to do flight lessons out of there, but it wasn't like you didn't have passenger planes, and again, that's why there wasn't a fence at that time around the airport. But the airport's closed now, it doesn't function at all. But yeah, I just thought it was relevant because
absolutely, I agree.
Yeah,
and I mean,
that came up.
Is that smart? Is that smart thinking on the behalf of the extraterrestrials? I mean, operating near Air Force bases and airports in general would be a great way to make you believe that what you saw was a plane. If they're taking people from the arse end of nowhere, living out on a mountainside or a little small village, when they start retracing these memories and thinking, actually, well, that doesn't make sense because there is no flight paths this way, so it can't have been a plane. But actually, if they're taking people like yourself or people around bases and airports, when they start to retrace these memories, they're going to think, oh, well, I might have seen a plane, and everything gets muddied then. Like the waters become really muddied, and it just makes their life easier. So is that a smart move on their behalf? Like, makes their life easier, I suppose. Because a lot of people will think, oh, yeah, what you saw was planes, but maybe that's why they do it, because that's what they want you to think.
Exactly. But as I was saying earlier on, I can't drive past that old family home without that being the first thing that pops into my mind. And so if it was just a dream, it was certainly like the most influential dream ever. And I've had more graphic and, you know, shocking dreams than that. And, you know, some that have really upset me for days, but I know that they're dreams, you know? And so again, logically, as a pretty logical human being, I know the difference between remembering a dream and remembering something else. And this doesn't feel like a dream.
It's sad that you'll never get to piece together the entire jigsaw, but maybe that's a good thing as well. So
if anybody's watching, you remember seeing a crop circle in a paper in 1989 around May, you know, please, if you know where it is, or you know, please reach out, put something in comments. That would be such a big part of this whole journey to be able to find that.
Yeah, I was going to say, guys, as well, anybody that is listening and watching this, if you've got any similar experiences, or you've had similar experiences with details that are very similar to what G's spoken about here, then please do comment down in the box below, because piecing things together like this and trying to build a database of similarities across all these different cases really does help in strengthening people's arguments and cases. Yeah. So yeah, G, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And your story, when we spoke before coming on here, I never knew that it was going to be to that extent. That's completely blown me away.
Well, it's going to completely blow a few people away, because, as I said, I've only told 4 people in my lifetime. So there's friends and family. Even my fiance has never heard this story before. It's something that I've carried with me over the 33 years quite internally, and only for that reason, because it's difficult to share and it's difficult for other people to understand, I think. But maybe I've made some motion into other people understanding, and you just made a really good point that the more people that come out and talk about these experiences, it creates a catalogue of information that you can use as comparable stuff. But looking forward to having you back on the Monty Zone again. We're going to be having you back on an episode that we're doing on the UFO subject. So that's going to be awesome.
Absolutely.
And if you wouldn't mind putting a link to our channel in the description, that would be super awesome. So guys can come over and continue this kind of subject matter and conversation with us. But Ben will be joining us again soon, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, the pleasure is all mine. And
congratulations on your channel. You're doing so well.
Thank you, G.
Thank you. Over the last few weeks.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody seems to be enjoying it. I've upped the uploading pace as well. I've been trying to upload daily and then every 2 days, and I've been playing around with that. It seems to be working really well, and you guys seem to be enjoying that as well. So you guys that are watching this as well, like I said, please do go over to the Monty Zone. I will leave a link somewhere, and help those guys over on the Monty Zone. And yeah, any kind of answers that you can give G, please do fire them down below in the comments box below. And I think we should wrap this one up on that note, G. What do you think?
Yeah.
Cheers,
see you guys. Bye.
Cheers, G. Thank you.